All right, but we are going to talk about normal versus not normal aging and understanding our risk. So before I get started, we here at the James L. West Center, we are a not-for-profit organization. We are a long-term care community, and we only serve persons that have a dementia of some sort. So we do have our residential program, residential side. We have our education side, which you are taking advantage of today. And we also have a day program. It is currently closed, but we are actively in the process of getting that open as soon as we possibly can. But our mission is to serve persons impacted by dementia. So whether that's the individual with a diagnosis, healthcare professionals, families, friends, and the community at large, in whatever capacity that they're impacted. And that's what we do here at the West Center. This is information about today for our CE credits. We'll get that 1 hour CE credit for nursing, social work, and licensed counselor. And what we're going to talk about today, the objectives, we will talk and identify normal versus abnormal changes that happen to the brain, related to the brain. We'll be able to recognize causes of memory loss and confusion other than dementia. So we will talk about what dementia is and what it isn't, but also what can cause some confusion or maybe even memory loss or cognitive impairment in persons that may not have a progressive dementia. So we'll describe all that and explain that more at the end of the program. A few statistics that I think why most people really want to know what is normal about aging and what isn't is because 80% of people around the world are concerned about getting dementia in their later life. I want to say it's probably the most feared disease in the world and one of the most complex diseases in the world. Over 50 million people worldwide are living with a dementia. And it is projected that that number will increase to 152 million in 2050, which is not that far away, barring there's a prevention or a cure or anything like that. Right now, there's a new case arising every 3 seconds in the world, and up to 3/4 of those persons with dementia worldwide have not received a diagnosis. And we still, unfortunately, even though we're learning more about dementia and have a better understanding of it, or we're talking about it more, there still is a huge stigma about this disease, about memory loss. I think there's some stigma about just getting older anyway, particularly in America. But just understanding what to do. And is this normal? Should I be concerned? What questions do I need to ask the doctor? But also healthcare professionals are incorrectly think that dementia is a part of normal aging too. So as you guys are educating yourselves and coming to free programs, but sharing that knowledge with everybody, not just, friends and family or a neighbor, but also those that we work with that, that need or healthcare practitioners or providers in any form or fashion. They need education too. We all need to be continuously learning about this. The World Alzheimer's Report, this is one of my, I think, kind of favorite things to live by, or a thing to live by. But if we enter mature age, better developed with healthier brains, we are likely to live longer, but live happier and more independent lives, with a much reduced chance of developing dementia. I want to say that I think probably worldwide, everybody's one of their main goals is to stay autonomous, to live independently, not have to rely on other people, just to live my daily life. I would say that's a goal for the majority of people in the world. And there are ways that we can do that. But it is recognizing what's normal about aging and what's not, which is what we're going to talk about. A few things I'll point out here, and these are 2020 Alzheimer's statistics. These come from the Alzheimer's Association facts and figures. They put them out every year. They do have their 2021 numbers out. But right now, Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. And at the end of this program, we'll talk about what the differences are, what dementia really is and what it really isn't. But Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. And I believe from people 65 and older, it's the 4th or 5th leading cause of death for that population in the United States. But I'll point out this last bullet point here. There are treatments that can help you manage the condition. There's treatments that help you manage it. There are not treatments that can stop it, that can cure it, or that can prevent a Alzheimer's type dementia or related dementia, that they can help you live well with dementia. And these are from medications out there that help with symptoms, but also just how we provide the care for those living with this disease. And I think what we need to do is to start thinking about, how can I live well with this disease? A lot like cancer has done this. People are living well, even though they might have a cancer or another chronic illness. How do I still maintain a high quality of life and live well with this and not have it define me? And we need to start doing that and changing that mindset for dementia as well. And there are proven ways that we can reduce our risk for developing an Alzheimer's dementia or related dementia. And I'll leave you with some of those at the end of this program too. But I want to clarify, there are causes of memory loss and confusion. The Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common type of a progressive chronic dementia. So we're talking about for dementias that somebody gets, it's a diagnosis that we cannot stop or cure. This is a progressive terminal diagnosis for somebody that has a progressive dementia. Again, Alzheimer's disease is the most common type, or the most diagnosed. Most people have an Alzheimer's type dementia. There's vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, Huntington's disease, HIV-associated mixed dementia secondary. There's about 130 different types of progressive dementias. Dementia is that umbrella term, and this is a range of conditions that somebody has that causes some changes to the brain. Essentially, that's what dementia is. And we have these progressive dementias, but I really appreciate everybody wanting to know what's normal about aging and what's not normal, because there are a lot of things that look like a progressive dementia that can be fixed or treated, or it's another thing that's causing these brain changes. Somebody can have an infection or an immune disorder that looks, that can cause confusion. It can cause memory loss issues. It can cause disorientation. And it looks like they're, an individual is not able to do like they used to. And this is that infection or that immune disorder. A health condition, if somebody has a heart condition that's not being managed well, so they have a stroke that wasn't treated, or it's not treated well, so they did have a big stroke. They're having coronary artery disease. They have COPD, diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes that they're living with, that can increase to some cognitive impairment, but particularly if it's not managed well, or if it's not diagnosed yet. Somebody that's having a breathing issue, lung issues, they're not getting that oxygen and blood flow to the brain that the brain needs to be able to operate optimally. Somebody that has a metabolic disorder, they could be from poor eating habits. It could be that their thyroid is out of whack. It could just be that they're deficient in some things. As we get older, our body doesn't make certain vitamins as well for some people, but that can be something that can be easily fixed. If you're short on vitamin D or vitamins B12, that can be easily fixed. Medication interactions. I would say most people, 55 plus, 65 plus, are taking more than 2 medications. And these are medications prescribed by doctors, but also those medications we prescribe ourselves, those over-the-counter medications that we take. And we can be taking a lot of medications that can interact with each other and wreak havoc within our bodies, but also our brains, and can cause memory loss, confusion, disorientation, not being able to do like they used to. And then there's lifestyle choices. Abusing drugs and alcohol and smoking are big ones. If we have midlife obesity that went on for a long time, just not taking care of ourselves well, or those choices, we're not exercising, very limited exercise, or no exercise at all physically, but also mentally as well. Depression and anxiety that goes untreated or unmanaged, and unmanaged stress. All of these things can look like and cause some brain changes. The brain changes caused by these particular conditions are not permanent. What we just talked about, the Alzheimer's disease, the vascular dementia, those progressive dementias, those are things that we can't really change or influence. We know how those will progress throughout the brain and slowly get worse over time. These, however, are things that we can change. They can be fixed or they can be treated, and those symptoms, that memory loss, confusion, can clear up or go away. And the reason I was talk about this, and I kind of talk about it in depth, is because whether it's we're looking or we're worried about ourselves or we're worried about somebody else, we don't have to jump to conclusions if you're noticing some changes in somebody, because it can be something else. We don't automatically have to say, well, that's it. She's got Alzheimer's disease. Let's just throw in the towel. It can be a whole host of things. And even if they do have Alzheimer's disease, what do we put in place to help them live well with that type of dementia? So the older healthy brain, there are changes that happen as we get older. We, physically, but also mentally, we do kind of slow down a little bit. With the brain, the communication between our neurons slows a little bit. It might take us a little bit longer to process something or to recall that information and just remembering it. It just takes a little bit longer, but it doesn't mean it's gone. It's still there. It's just slower. Blood flow to the brain can be reduced. We need our blood flow to the brain. Our brain needs that blood flow. It needs that oxygen. It needs the nutrients that the blood carries to our brain so it can work to the best of its ability. As we get older, the blood flow may slow down a little bit. And that can be because we're more sedentary. As we get older, we're moving slower. So the blood flow can be reduced. And there are sometimes shrinkage in some areas of the brain. The shrinkage that we see, though, doesn't correlate with any brain changes. So it doesn't correlate with the memory loss or cognitive impairment. There's just can be some shrinkage in some areas of the brain that we've been seeing on x-rays or MRI scans. We do see inflammation that can increase as we get older as well, too. Inflammation throughout the body, but inflammation in the brain too, that can be contributing to just the slower processing of stuff. And we are not able to hold working memory or items in our working memory as well. Typically, most people can hold about 8 items in our working memory. And that working memory is what I need right now. I need to know right now or within the next couple of minutes, I need this information. We can hold 5 to 8 things in that working memory. As we get older, it's more like 5, maybe 4 or 5 things that we can hold in that working memory. And that's just a normal part of getting older. So you might think, gosh, I just really can't remember like I used to. Typically we see this, when we walked into that room and we might've gotten distracted and now I've forgotten while I walked into that room. Well, that's a normal part of the aging process. We'll kind of delve into that a little bit more here in a second. And we have a slower response to sensory stimulation, as we're walking down the street or walking through the mall or through the house or whatever, all that sensory stimulation coming at us, we're just processing it a little bit slower. Doesn't mean we're not processing it, it's just a little bit slower. But also the older healthy brain is extremely resourceful, more resourceful as it gets older than it was when it was younger. Our comprehension and general knowledge improves. And our ability to perceive other people's emotions, making better decisions improves. Being able to see from other person's perspectives improves as we get older. And our brain is able to adapt to new challenges and tasks a lot better. They call this the plastic brain, or we have a lot more cognitive reserve that we're able to pull from because we've built it up over time. All of our experiences, all the knowledge, all the things that we've learned and held on to, we're able to pull from that as we get older, and we have much more reserve as we get older than we did when we were younger. So even if a part of our brain's not working well, for whatever reason, it might be some medication interaction, or we might have maybe a little stroke that we're not aware of. For whatever reason, we have more cognitive reserve that our brain can pull from and work from. It would seem like everything still runs smoothly, even though part of our brain might be a little disrupted or maybe a little bit damaged at the time. So some quick brain facts, just because it's interesting to know that the brain, it weighs about 3 pounds. The brain is also very greedy. We talked about our brains needing all that oxygen and blood flow, or the blood flow, because our brain needs about 25% of all the oxygen that our body intakes, 25% of our nutrients, and about 70% of our body's glucose supply. So our brain needs to be able to get that blood flow up there so it has that oxygen, it carries the nutrients so it can work to the best of its ability. It's the fattest organ. In each one of our neurons, so our brain has about 100 billion neurons in it, and each one of those one neurons has up 1 to 10,000 other connections to other neurons throughout the brain. That's where that cognitive reserve comes in. So let's say one connection doesn't quite work very well anymore. That's okay, because I have potentially 10 more connections to a different neuron that'll work just fine. And a myth or something I think is misunderstood is even as we grow older, we're always able to strengthen neuronal connections, and also grow new neuronal connections. So these neurons can continue to connect to other neurons throughout the brain or strengthen those connections. And we do use 100% of our brain. We may not use it 100% of the time, but we do use 100% of our brain. So some things about normal aging. This is what's going to change that's normal for everybody. Our memory becomes a little bit less efficient. We're going to have a harder time, like I mentioned, processing and recalling information, but it doesn't go away. So there's a difference between my memory is not as efficient and losing a memory. Losing memories is not a normal part of aging. But, it's just, it's taken me, I don't quite remember all the details of the event or the experience, but I remember the event. And being able to process or recall that information, like I mentioned earlier, it's just a little bit slower. It doesn't mean that we can't do it. Somebody that is having some progressive dementia, permanent changes, their ability to process information may not be there. To record anything new that might be really damaged where they're not able to do that. Whereas somebody aging normally we can, it just takes a little bit longer. What I should also see as normal aging is somebody's complaining of memory slips or memory issues or senior moments, right? But they're able to provide a lot of detail regarding that incident of forgetfulness. And a great example I have is my father. My father seems to be aging normally right now. But his normal, I guess, aging baseline was he has a hard time keeping up with his keys, his wallet, and his phone. Those three major things. He always has. That's just been normal for my dad. But there was times, he's gotten better, but there was times where in the past he would call me and say, Jamie, you would not believe I had left my wallet out at this event that I went to, like an outside concert. I left my wallet at this concert, and of course I had this sinking feeling. I just couldn't, oh my gosh, I realized I didn't have my wallet. Where did I leave it? But so I retraced my steps. So I remember I was there, and would you believe it or not that my wallet was sitting right up there in the middle of that field right where I left it. And I was thinking, well, yes, thank you, Jesus, that your wallet was still sitting out there in the middle. You were so lucky, Dad. But his forgetfulness of leaving his wallet there, and that's not the only incident, but he's able to provide considerable detail about that incident of that forgetfulness. What's not normal about aging is typically what we see are people that are having some memory issues, but it's everybody else around them that complain about the memory issues, not necessarily that person. That's kind of, we can see that a lot. So my mother, she had some dementia. She had some brain changes happen to her the last couple of years that she was with us. And she might have a few complaints about some memory issues, but they would be, normal. Well, I'm just having a hard time remembering things like I used to. But her immediate family and friends and coworkers had more concerns than she did. And that's kind of what we see a little bit more often. Getting lost in familiar places. And if you can relate, you might have had a time where you have gotten lost, or it's kind of like you walk out of a building, maybe you've never been there before, or it's a parking lot, huge, like at the mall, a huge parking lot. And you think, oh my gosh, where did I park? Or I'm really not sure where I need to go next. How do I get out? I'm confused. How do I get out of this parking lot? Where am I supposed to go next? So it's that momentary kind of loss or pause to remember where to go, or where I'm at, or where to go. Persons that are not aging normally, they're going to get lost in familiar places. And what we typically see, or what's more common, is to them, they're not lost. they are not lost. So they might hop into their car from home and they go somewhere and they're looking for Foley's, right? And if you remember, Foley's was a big department store a long time ago. I remember Foley's. I can kind of see it in my mind's eye. It's not around anymore. But if I'm not aging normally and I want to go to the mall and I'm thinking Foley's because I'm remembering, I mean, I can see it. I'm remembering Foley's back several years ago, or maybe decades ago. But I can remember that. And that's what I'm going to the mall. And that's what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for those visual cues. And I'm looking for the Foley signs and what it's looked like. So I keep driving until I see a Foley's. Well, what's also not normal about aging is the passing of time. Persons that are having some serious brain changes, that passing of time doesn't really mesh up anymore. So the passing of 5 minutes, or not being aware that I've driven an hour now trying to find the Foley's when really the mall is only 15 minutes away from where I live, but I'm not aware that I've driven for an hour and I still haven't found the Foley's, so I must be lost. That kind of escapes somebody that's not aging normally. Whereas a normal aging, it might be that momentary, where am I supposed to go next? Or, ooh, I forgot where I parked. Ugh, I wasn't really paying attention when I parked. And now I kind of got to search for the car. Another thing we see is unable to operate common devices. So somebody that's not aging, or somebody that is aging normally, will always be able to learn how to operate something new. You'll always be able to learn something new. And a really good example of this is that new iPad or that new phone or the new TV, smart TV that's come up, how to be able to operate that. A aging normal person will be able to learn how to operate that. What we see is some people may not care to learn how to operate that. I hear it a lot. Well, I've never used one of these before in my life. Why am I going to start now? It's not that they can't, they just don't want to. Somebody that's not aging normally would not be able to really learn something new on how to do that, how to operate that new device. And those are some big differences there in normal and non-normal aging. A normal aging individual will always be able to have interpersonal social skills, like we mentioned, and we get better at seeing it from other person's perspective and having that social chit chat and being able to converse back and forth with people and have it be appropriate. Somebody that's not aging normally, maybe be able to do that for a short period of time. But then if it goes on for 30 minutes to an hour of this social conversation, you might notice they start to withdraw. Or they see things that are a little bit weird, or, well, that doesn't quite fit here, or they're just not following the conversation. Or even possibly they've started to repeat themselves and not aware that they're repeating themselves. Also about normal aging, memory for recent important events will stay. If it's not important, we may not remember it though, right? And that's normal. If it wasn't that important, we may not remember that. Persons that are not aging normal, even if it was important, they are going to have a hard time remembering those incidents. So again, persons that are aging normally may be more concerned about their forgetfulness than close family members or friends. And I have no doubt that it is scary to have more senior moments. Because what we tend to happen is as we do get older, we are, tend to forget where we put stuff down, or I'm having a harder time remembering people's names that I first met than I used to, or I did walk into this room and forget where I'm at. And this is happening to me a lot more often. And there can be some fear with that. There can be really some frustration with that because it's happening more and more often, and that can cause anxiety, right? But understanding that those are normal parts of aging. I walk into a room and I might forget why I walked in there. So typically what we do is we tend to look around, why did I walk in here? Try to visually pick up on a cue to remind myself. And then the next thing we do is talk out loud, why in the world did I come in this room? What was I going to do in here? Try to visually or to auditorily cue ourselves into what we were going to do. Maybe we remember, maybe we don't. So we go back to the other room, we sit down, we get comfortable. And as soon as we get comfortable, it pops in our head. That's why I walked into that room. Gosh, So it comes to us eventually. Or being able to recall names or words or that event. I was gonna tell you about something and I just cannot remember. It seemed important, but I just cannot remember what I was going to tell you. And it's frustrating. Oh, it's so frustrating. But it eventually comes to us. Now, it might come to us in the middle of the night when we no longer need it anymore, and it's not important, but it eventually comes to us if it's that important. Persons that are not aging normally, it's not going to come to them. It's not going to eventually. They might walk into the room and not ever remember why they walked into that room, or they start doing something else altogether. Or they don't remember, they just can't recall what they were going to tell you or the name of somebody or something like that. As we're aging normally, we'll always be able to register and learn new information. And I mentioned that earlier. It's going to be a little bit slower, but we'll always be able to do that. And it's going to be easier for us if we do it in our better times of the day. So we each have a good time of the day. For most people, the morning time is a better time of the day. We're more awake, we're more alert. All cylinders are firing, everything's wiring together and working just fine. So we're able to process quicker and recall quicker, catch on to things quicker. As opposed to for some of us in the later afternoon, we're more tired, we're more restless and moving a little bit slower, just a little bit more sluggish. So we'll still be able to learn something new. It's just going to take a little bit longer. So knowing that about ourselves and say, if this is important or if this is something I really want to concentrate on, I want to be able to do it in my better part of the day. And that could be my doctor's appointments I make for my better time of the day. So I can remember to ask those questions or really be able to process what the doctor's telling me or what those instructions are or whatever it may be. Also knowing that multitasking is going to be more difficult. And quite honestly, I think people that say they're good multitaskers may be exaggerating. I think a lot of studies have shown that multitasking is really not that great. Nobody's really that good at it. Unless you're multitasking, I can do laundry and chew gum and talk on the phone at the same time. But if it's important, I don't want to be filling out some legal paperwork and having to remember to cook what's on the stove and not let it catch on fire. Multitasking that way is hard, and that's hard for everybody. But as we get older, it becomes harder and harder. And a lot of that has to do with how many things we can hold in our working memory. That just kind of goes down as a normal part. Remember, we can hold 8 things. As we get older, it's generally about 5, maybe 4 or 5 things. But it's just so much harder to multitask. So I really encourage you, if you have something important that you want to do, or you really need to concentrate, really do it just one task or one experience or one event at a time. Don't try and do 3 things at once. And when it's your good time of the day, right? And you might notice that those good times of our day or our ability to learn something new, when we were younger, we could switch back and forth. So we could do morning, we could do early afternoon, we could do late evening. And we would be able to learn something new or adjust to those changes on how we took a class, or, yeah, I can do that class. That'll be fine. I'll just drink an extra cup of coffee. I'll be fine. And I'll be able to process all that information the same way. As we get older, it's harder for us to do that. So we really need to really focus in on what's my good time of the day. It's not that I can't do it. I just may not process everything, or it's going to take me longer to do that. But with normal aging, our ability to make sense out of information, our ability to reason, our ability to make good judgments, that doesn't decline. As a matter of fact, it gets a little bit better as we get older. A few things about abnormal aging, and I've talked a lot about some of those differences, but some things I'll highlight is forgetfulness that disrupts our daily life. I can't keep track of our day. And this can be anywhere from what am I supposed to do in the morning? Am I supposed to pay these bills? All the way up to just the day-to-day living of, did I eat? Did I take my medications? I don't remember. I'm going to take it again. Should I pay these bills again? I'm going to go to the grocery store and get this toilet paper, even though I've already gone this morning, because I can't keep track of my day. Forgetfulness, which we see that changes quite a bit for people that are having some abnormal brain changes. Again, you may notice that they complain of their forgetfulness, but but it also might be that those around them are complaining more about what they're forgetting or what they're not remembering or how they're changing. And they might become less interested in social activities or behave socially inappropriate. And I mentioned that earlier. So it might be that you notice they can do really well for a short period of time, particularly at a doctor's office, or, when your neighbors or your friends come and visit and they seem to be doing just perfectly great. But as the day goes on, it gets worse and it gets harder for them. Or even if somebody stays longer, so if somebody stays for a full day or they stay for a weekend, then we can notice that they're having a harder time keeping up with conversations. They get more tired easy, maybe more frustrated, which is different from how they would be in the past. I've heard a doctor say that really with the dementia or with abnormal, or, if we're concerned whether it's normal or not normal, if you see anything that's just really uncharacteristic for your loved one, anything uncharacteristic. And an example I have is, with my mother, she did have some memory challenges that we saw that changed for her in those last couple of years of her life. She couldn't remember, she remembered parts of something. So my brother's birthday was coming up and she knew that her son's birthday was coming up. She knew that. She did not remember that we've talked about it ad nauseum about what we were going to do for his birthday. We've had several conversations about it. She couldn't remember what we had planned. And so it was a constant, what are we going to do for his birthday? What are we doing for his birthday? And she became worked up about it. I think in a lot of it because she didn't want to forget, because she was aware that she was having some brain changes and that scared her. So that was something for her. And for my mom, she was able to work. She continued to work, and her work really never suffered. She worked a lot with numbers, so that part of her brain didn't change at that part of her life. But what we did see some memory changes, but we also saw some personality changes that were uncharacteristic for my mom. And they weren't personality changes to where mom became mean and ugly. It was just uncharacteristic. My mom was very much a solitary person. She was an introvert, and she liked to be at home and she liked to be alone a lot. She was a reader. She liked to do things. She was independent, do things on her own. But what we noticed that was uncharacteristic personality-wise for her is she wanted to go out and do stuff. She wanted to go, my brother would host parties at his house and she wanted to go to those parties and she would stay for a long time. At one of those parties, she gave an impromptu speech. And this is going on and me and my dad are in the back and we're like, oh, what's going to happen? And it's not a bad thing. It was just uncharacteristic for mom. So really with a lot of these, because you use bullet points and there's these top 10 things, warning signs for Alzheimer's and dementia or abnormal aging. And we want to look at these things, but also if you just see anything that's really uncharacteristic about your loved one, a client, or even if it's in yourself. There we are. So here are a couple of graphics from the Alzheimer's Association and the Alzheimer's Society, excuse me. And there are 10 signs your loved one has Alzheimer's disease or a related dementia. A related dementia would be vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia. And you can see these on here. There's memory loss. Problems with language. So I just can't remember, or I'm having a harder time finding the words that I'm looking for. And I'm having a hard time maybe comprehending words as well. Poor decreased judgment. You just notice they're making poor judgments or having, or poor decisions maybe, then that would have been different for them. Misplacing things and not being able to retrace their steps. I talked about my dad, he misplaces his wallet or his keys. He can misplace them, but he can always retrace his steps. If there comes a day where he's having a hard time retracing his steps, then that would be a change for my dad. And that would be something we would want to look at, right? Or you find things in odd places. So there might be that the remote control is in the refrigerator, or you find a bunch of scissors, you have scissors around the house and they're in the sock drawer. That's an example from an actual family I've worked with. You're just finding things in odd places. In trouble with images or spatial relationships. And there's, particularly when driving, I'm having a hard time seeing like where I am in space. So I go to reach for my coffee and I knock it over, or I'm in the car and I don't see, that stop sign, and I either blow through it, or I hit the curb, or I'm hitting the side, where I'm backing out, I'm hitting the side column right here. I'm just not as aware of where I am in space and how to navigate that. Having a harder time performing familiar tasks I've always done, whether that's following a recipe, cooking, planning a vacation, managing finances, paying bills, all these things that I've always done. I'm having a harder time doing those. Disoriented to time and place. I mentioned the passing of time can be very confusing for persons that are not aging normally. And where am I to? Because I may be remembering something 20 years ago, and now that it's changed, I'm not sure where I'm at. Problem keeping tracks of things, changes in mood and behavior. And again, I stress it could be that they do become more frustrated or quick to anger because they're having the changes, and how frustrating that can be and scary that can be. But it also doesn't mean that they're automatically going to be mean. You just be a change in what's happening. And then you might notice they withdraw from work or social activities, or they don't stay as long at their organization or their Bible study, or they don't call their friends on the phone as much. So these are just some signs. Again, we don't want to jump to conclusions that this is automatically an Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or a vascular dementia. It could be something else that's causing these symptoms. Again, Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, they are progressive and they are neurologic disorders. So when you have one of these types of progressive dementia, and there's about 130 different types, there's not a cure for them. Unfortunately, there are medications that help ease the symptoms of them, and how we treat those that are living with this, they can do better with and live well with this disease. But we do know cognitive decline over time. So eventually, a lot of times it looks like it starts with some memory loss, particularly with Alzheimer's disease. But it will progress throughout the brain to where it starts to affect them physically, and then to where they will become dependent on others to help them with just their self-care activities throughout the day. And then it is a terminal illness. If somebody doesn't pass away from something else, they will pass away from a progressive dementia. And Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. It's a brain disease, like COPD is a type of heart disease. So Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. And again, dementia is that umbrella term. But there are also other things that can cause cognitive impairment. That was not managing other chronic illnesses that you may have, abusing drugs and alcohol, smoking. You might be malnourished or deficient in some vitamins that can be fixed or treated, medication interactions, those things. And with dementia, it does affect most areas of the brain. So it does affect the memory eventually. Not all dementias start with a memory loss, but your Alzheimer's disease does. You will see some hard times with that short-term memory. But eventually all dementias will affect most areas of the brain. And the functions of the brain can include the thinking, the reasoning, making good decisions, being able to problem solve, good judgment, good reasoning, being able to pay attention and focus and concentrate. Language skills, again, this is from using words, having a hard time using words, finding that word that I need, being able to form a sentence and put that together and stay a part of a conversation, but also from comprehension of other person's words and sentences and instruction. Personality and behavior, ability to care for oneself. And this is anywhere from the big, large activities of the day, being able to know, gosh, I got to plan my meals for a week. Here's what I want. I'm going to write down the ingredients. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to buy the right ingredients, pay for them, come home, cook them in a meal, eat them. Those big things on how to care for myself, all the way up to I have an internal cue of, I'm feeling some pain. My arthritis is acting up and I'm real stiff. I want to take some medicine for that. Or, gosh, I'm hungry. That hunger feeling that we have. Now, what do I do with that feeling, and being able to go feed myself and do all that. To eventually it will affect some movement and coordination, and then even the ability to swallow properly. And we do want to know our risk factors. That's important. As we are talking about what's normal and not normal part of aging, I do want to know what my risk factors are. And these risk factors on the screen here: age, family, mild cognitive impairment, any trauma to the brain, and Down syndrome. These are some risk factors that we don't have a whole lot of influence over. We don't have, we aren't able to stop getting older, not yet, at least. We don't have a lot of control who our family is. If we have mild cognitive impairment, and this is a diagnosis that somebody has gotten, that they are noticing that there's some abnormal memory issues. So they're having some short-term memory issues, but there's not another brain or cognitive impairment there. With the dementia and Alzheimer's disease or vascular dementia, we have all those functions of the brain that we just listed: the language impairment, ability for judgments and problem solving. So at least two areas of the brain need to be affected for it to be a progressive chronic dementia. If somebody has mild cognitive impairment or MCI, there's just that one area of the brain that's affected, so that they're having a hard time with their memories. That might be different than normal aging. So it's not normal aging, but it's also not a progressive dementia either. About 50% of these people that get a mild cognitive impairment diagnosis do go on to develop another brain change, so they have a progressive dementia. The other half can just maintain where they're at. They might have some abnormal memory issues, but they can maintain where they're at. Trauma to the brain, and this is severe, severe trauma. You're in a car wreck several years ago, you fell off your bike, whatever it is, that trauma to the brain. We can't control that trauma to the brain. That may cause some dementia down the road. And then Down syndrome. They're seeing that individuals that live long enough that have Down syndrome develop the same hallmark signs that somebody with Alzheimer's has in their brain. So they have the exact same look of somebody with Alzheimer's disease. The brain has the same look as somebody with Down syndrome if they live long enough. So they're doing a lot of studies on them. So I show that these are risk factors. Age being the number one risk factor. As we get older, we are more susceptible to develop a progressive dementia. But I do want to say it is not a normal part of aging. Any progressive dementia is not a normal part of aging. It's becoming, unfortunately, a little bit more common that we see it more often, but it's not normal. And then family, I failed to mention, if you have a parent or a sibling that has an Alzheimer's disease or progressive dementia, your risk is a little bit increased for that, but it's not deterministic. It's just a risk factor increase. But some other things that can increase our risk: age, family, type 2 diabetes that goes unmanaged, head trauma, those lifestyle choices. If we abuse drugs and alcohol, that's smoking, just smoking in general. Unmanaged cardiovascular disease, particularly high blood pressure and high cholesterol, can increase your risk. Midlife obesity. If you have sleep disturbances, long-term sleep disturbances that are not managed or not treated, can cause your risk factor to be increased for a progressive dementia. The same as a history of an untreated depression or anxiety as well. And then being exposed to environmental toxins and those lifestyle choices. So pollutions, chemicals, if we're not wearing masks, if we're using Roundup in our yard and we're not wearing masks, that can increase your risk, yeah. Unmanaged stress, poor nutrition, and then limited or no physical activity, mental activity, or even social activity can increase your risk for some cognitive impairments. And I put that up there because as we get older, again, there are things that change that are normal. That's going to happen to everybody. You may not like it, but it's going to happen. But then there's that abnormal stuff. But knowing what are my risk factors for an increased cognitive impairment, and what might that look like, and how can I offset some of those risk factors if I can. And I'll leave or end with time for questions, but I do want to say if you are worried about yourself or you're worried about somebody else, getting a proper diagnosis is important. Unfortunately, I still hear from family that say, I was concerned about my memory issues. I went to the doctor. They did like a 5-10 minute verbal test with me, and they put me on Aricept. And so, but they just put me on Aricept. okay, all right, and I would say there is not one test that can tell you whether you have an Alzheimer's disease or a related dementia. It's a battery of tests that need to be done. And just like, anybody, I don't want to be on a medication that I don't need, right? So just because you say something about a memory loss or you're concerned about your memory, there needs to be a battery of tests done before you're put on a medication approved for Alzheimer's or related dementia. But also we would hate for you to go to a trusted doctor and they just kind of slough it off as, oh, that's a normal part of aging, if you really have some concerns about yourself or your loved one. So a proper diagnosis, a good diagnosis can come from a geriatrician, a neurologist, it can come from a neuropsychologist or a team of specialists. You're really trying to get the whole picture. I want to look at the whole person and the whole body because I want to make sure and rule out that it's not depression or anxiety. I want to rule out that it's not my medications interacting with each other. I want to rule out that I'm not deficient in some vitamins or something like that. It's a ruling out process, really. And they do this through a thorough medical history, including a family history if they can. They'll do a mental status test. They'll do a physical neurological exam, extensive blood work, and sometimes they might do some brain imaging or a brain scan as they might seem appropriate or as might seem needed. To help rule out anything that could be causing this cognitive impairment and be able to give you a probable or possible diagnosis of a dementia, and then be able to tell you what type of dementia they may think it is. It's while the diagnosing is about 90% accurate, maybe even 95% accurate, it still can be hard, and it can take a while to diagnose it. So it can take several hours, and it might take several days to get this battery of tests done to rule out and have this picture of here's what we think is going on in your brain, and here's some steps to move forward. And then I still get this, why would I even test? I know mom has this, her mom had it, her brother had it, I know this is what it is, and why would I even test? There's not a cure anyway. But we really highly encourage it because the sooner you get tested, the sooner you can be put on medications that do help ease the symptoms. And most of the medications do work best in the early stages of the disease. So we really want people to get diagnosed. There's also less anxiety about unknown problems. You can also start to educate yourself and start to better plan for the future and start benefiting from, again, those medications and other forms of treatment, whether it's socialization, getting a part of the day program, and just connecting with your community resources. And then starting to focus on what's important and making those lifestyle choices on learning about the disease, what can help the symptoms, what can help give our loved ones or myself a high quality of life, even though I might be living with this, and what's important for me to focus on as a person diagnosed or me as the family, care partner, friend, caring for somebody with this type of dementia. And then here, just real quick, are the influences of brain health. We've talked about the risk factors, but these are some 6 proven ways to help manage, help decrease your risk for a cognitive impairment. And really, it's really helping you just age optimally. It can help reduce your risk, but it helps you just age the best you're going to be. And I think everybody wants that. But it's exercise, physical and mental, quality sleep, managing your stress, staying socially connected, and then a plant-based diet. So there's that. I know, let me stop sharing. There's some questions or some chat features in
We've
there.
had a lot of questions, Jamie. Okay. I've been trying to answer them, but I'm glad you left some time because we have had a lot of great questions coming from folks. Awesome. The one that I was just answering was about, if you have someone that has a lot of these symptoms, but they're refusing to go to the doctor. So 2 of the things I had said, and then Jamie, I'll let you follow up with it, was there are doctors that someone's asking to see the last slide, Jamie. There are doctors now who will come to the home if you'll call some of the clinics and see if you could get someone to come to the home. But what most people end up doing, and with dementia, we use a lot of therapeutic stories. The Alzheimer's Association calls those fiblets. where we have to tell a story. And you know what, my go-to has always been, I have an appointment that I need you to come with me. It's about me. So I'm making it where it isn't about you, because of course there's nothing wrong with you. And then you call that doctor's office ahead of time and let them know what's going on. Also, so that you don't wait, that you're going to need to get there and get right in, or have them call whenever they're ready for you to come in. Jamie, other ideas on when you have someone that is refusing to go in?
Yeah, I would say that as well, but also even now you can use the insurance as a person to get there, because it's part of the insurance. The insurance wants us to have some baseline measures on both of us, or you're 65, it's Medicare. This is what Medicare wants. We want to get the best deal on our insurance, and we have to get in and get those baseline measures. I would even say something like that. We started with my mom. She refused to go. And we were starting to talk about, once we pulled our heads out of the sand, we started to talk about how can we get her to go. And we started talking about insurance, because that would kind of like, oh, she wants to get the best deal. So we started to go down that route.
That's a good one too. And someone has mentioned also about PTSD or TBI at a young age, and now middle-aged, 40 to 55. I can tell you, I have had residents throughout the course of my career who had multiple concussions playing football in high school and college, and then in middle age developed dementia. So that is a real thing. So definitely getting into a neurologist, getting scans done, ruling out everything else with a primary care physician first. Let's see, somebody talked about what if they live far away. That's really difficult, because you've got to have a team. And sometimes people end up having to call friends that live near the person who lives far away, family members, church members, somebody who can step in and intervene, or they end up making a trip and going, okay, while I'm here, we're shopping for, like Jamie said, we're going to get the best insurance rate. So while I'm here, let's go ahead and make this appointment. It's just for Medicare. We're kind of playing down any of the symptoms we're having. You can write those symptoms down and hand them to the receptionist when you get to the doctor's office and tell them, I need them to read this before we get in the room. People do that an awful lot, so that you're not having to say it in front of them.
Yeah. And even now you can, email is pretty, for a lot of doctors, you can email them before and they'll get
patient portals. Yeah.
Patient portals. Thank you. Yeah. I did see in there, somebody asked about if you have a genetic risk factor about memory testing. So two things I would say about this, and I've already mentioned it, is for everybody to really go ahead and get a baseline. When you hit 60, get a baseline. I want to do this workup of all my baseline stuff, physically, but also mental, stuff. And as I get older, maybe every year, 5 years, as appropriate, we might test to see if there's a change. But we also want to know what's normal for you. What's your baseline? Because my baseline is different than Holly's, right? So we got to know what's normal for you. And if we have that normal baseline, we can, as the testing, we do testing or need to do testing, we can see actual true changes that are true to you. With memory testing, it's a personal thing. There's a right or wrong. I will say there's a few tests that you can do to see if you have a genetic variant that can increase your risk. What to say about that, we don't know what's deterministic. It's not determinate. It's not going to say you have this variant, you're absolutely going to get it. Well, I shouldn't say that. There is one gene that you will know that you will get it, whether you have this gene or not. That's extremely rare though. If that's in your family, you probably already know it, probably already a part of clinical trials and stuff like that. If that's part of your family, that gene that does determine whether you're going to get Alzheimer's disease or not. The other ones are risk factors. So you can get testing to see if you have those variances of those genes. A couple of things is it can increase maybe some fear factor into you that might increase anxiety, which can contribute to poor choices or just a poor negative outlook on stuff. But also you have to take insurance into factor too. If they already see that on you, you might not get insurance or long-term care insurance or something like that. So you do have to take that into factor. I mean, it's a personal choice, but weigh both sides of the thing. Holly, do you have anything else to add?
No, and I do want to put though that the latest statistic that's out as far as statistics with genetics. So this one is huge. This one's very, very high, and we see it all the time. So if let's say your parent has a sister, a brother or a sister, a full sibling who has Alzheimer's disease, it's a 70% chance. It's very, very high. It's the highest statistic I've seen that full siblings develop Alzheimer's disease. And you'll see that in many families where they'll say, yes, my aunt has it, my uncle has it, and now my mom is starting to show. That's the highest statistic I've seen. But if it is a parent, then it's 30%. If it's full sibling, it's 70. If it's a parent, it's 30. So full siblings have that higher statistic. And then do you know the definite indicator that you mentioned, Jamie?
The gene?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't know the name of it.
I've got it on a
young
slide
onset.
somewhere.
I know it's young onset. So if you have it in your family, you get it really young. And
it is. It's one of the early onset ones.
Yeah, but I can't tell you the name of it. Yeah.
When you start talking about the names of those, some of them are numbers that are about numbers and letters mixed in together. I know we've got it in one of our slides on another program.
Yeah. And I will say, with the statistics there that Holly just said, you can also, with your lifestyle choices, decrease that high percentage for sure. And a lot of those choices are lifestyle, fairly easy to follow lifestyle choices that can decrease that risk factor. So.
And then the programs, and I know we're right at time, the programs that we're going to be doing over the next few Mondays, we're going to do a deep dive into those less common dementias. So if you're interested in MS now falls under the dementia umbrella, ALS falls under the dementia umbrella, the malnutrition or the vitamin deficiencies that fall under the dementia umbrella, we're going to do deep dives into each of those over the next 3 to 4 weeks. So be looking for those, and we'll be real specific in the names so you'll know which ones you want to hop on. Good questions. Lots of great discussion.
Yeah, thank y'all. And be looking for that follow-up email this afternoon. And if there are any other questions, just email us back. You'll have both Holly and I's information in the email, and we hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, just a reminder about the CEU to fill out the survey when you get it, and then you'll get your CE. Please give us up to 3 weeks to get that to you. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.